Major challenge for law enforcement across this country. Millions of men simply cannot let go of their ex-wives and their girlfriends. And for some of them, that desire can turn criminal. Laws exist, plenty of laws, to protect women in these relationships where would-be stalkers must stay a certain distance away. But as Vicki Mabry found out, a legal order cannot always do the job. And a warning before we begin, some people may find the 911 call in tonight's report disturbing.
Amanda Ross in Kentucky, Tiana Notice in Connecticut, Cindy Bischoff in Illinois. Smart, strong women who, according to authorities, were all murdered by their significant other. And each one, at the time of her death, had a restraining order barring their ex-boyfriend from coming anywhere near them.
With the restraining order, it's just simply that, a restraining order, a piece of paper.
Cindy Bischoff's brother Mike says his sister was a successful commercial real estate agent living with her boyfriend in an affluent suburb outside of Chicago. Michael Giroux, a divorced father of 4. To Mike Bischoff, they seem like a happy couple.
He was very charming. Our kids knew him as Uncle Mike, and we spent holidays with him. So this is somebody that we knew very well, or at least we thought we knew very well.
But when Giroux lost his job, he got depressed and started drinking. Cindy encouraged him to get help. When he didn't, she asked him to leave. That's when the stalking started. He attempted to hang himself on her back patio. He broke into her house.
He took a 16-gallon drum of paint and pretty much every personal belonging that she had, from electronics to furniture and computers and all. He had painted everything in her house, turned on the sinks, clogged the drains, so there was flooding and over $50,000 worth of damage.
Cindy was afraid and not shy about saying so. She went immediately to court and got a restraining order.
And what's this?
This is an alarm, a panic alarm that she wore around her neck.
She also took responsibility for saving herself.
She sensed that this was a very dangerous situation, and she she stayed with my parents. She lived in a house in Plainfield, a rental house. She had her own house in Florida that she stayed at.
So she was essentially on the run.
She was on the run.
Cindy kept detailed notes of every time Giroux made contact. Stalked at Rob Roy Golf Course. Neighbor sees person resembling Mike on deck. She notified police and the court of each incident.
He was constantly going to her house. So he was constantly violating the restraining order.
Correct. He was driving around my parents' house, circling around there, leaving voicemail messages. He did it all.
How helpful were the police?
They were as helpful as they could be to the extent that they had the latitude to be helpful. Quite simply, we just believe that there wasn't the tools available to safeguard and protect these victims.
Giroux was arrested several times and spent 60 days in a psychiatric ward. But on March 7, 2008, as Cindy left her office, Michael Giroux shot her in the back and the head, then turned the gun on himself. He died almost immediately. Cindy died later at the hospital.
It doesn't have to happen. 3 women a day in this country do not have to die. Cindy Bischoff did not have to die.
We learn from studying domestic violence homicides.
Harvard Law School lecturer Diane Rosenfeld is an expert on domestic violence and restraining orders.
I think that law enforcement and the criminal justice system is not doing enough presently, obviously, to protect women from very predictable, very preventable types of violence.
Restraining orders, do they work?
In most cases they do. In about 70% of the cases they do, but this is not a perfect number. And when they don't work, that's a very, very, very dangerous thing.
It didn't work for 25-year-old Tiana Notice, a master's degree candidate at the University of Hartford, who police say was stabbed to death by her boyfriend last year on Valentine's Day. She had the presence of mind to dial 911 during the savage attack.
Tiana had a restraining order?
Yes, she did. She had an active restraining order at the time of her death.
Did you think that made her safe?
At the time, I thought it would work.
Tiana did too, up to a point. Like Cindy Bischoff, she tried to protect herself. She set up a camera outside her apartment. She armed herself with pepper spray and reported all violations.
When was the last time she went to the police, and what did they tell her?
February 14th,
The day she was killed?
the day she was killed. She dropped off some emails,
Proof that he was violating the restraining order.
proof that he was violating the restraining order. She made a note in her log that the police said they want to arrest him
When?
that night.
Police in the small town of Jonesville, North Carolina, were forced to pay attention when they were sued by Vernetta Cockram. She says she was a constant presence at the police station about 100 yards from her house. Today, she bears the scars, emotional and physical, from her husband's final attack. That day, in November of 2002, she came home to find that he had murdered her 17-year-old daughter and was lying in wait for her.
I went to the door and pushed it open, and he lunged at me with a knife.
Did he say anything?
He said, "She's dead, and I'm going to kill you."
Ironically, just hours before her husband's vicious attack, local police told her that he would be under arrest that night. Too little, too late, she says, and sued. She settled with the town, which did not admit any wrongdoing, for nearly $500,000.
We're at a moment in time where law enforcement and the criminal justice system need to rethink their approach to domestic violence because it can be stopped.
This is the actual movements of the person who has the GPS unit attached to them.
All of this could have possibly been prevented with a widely used piece of technology, GPS. Police are using it in Massachusetts and 14 other states. At the Massachusetts Probation Office, Deputy Commissioner Paul Lucci says GPS puts victims in a protected zone.
So basically, you watch them move around the map.
That's absolutely correct.
So this is probably the victim's
Could be the victim's home, the victim's place of work.
Offenders wear an ankle bracelet that's tracked by GPS and monitored 24 hours a day. Authorities know instantly if they're violating the restraining order.
We said right from the very beginning, we cannot guarantee anybody's safety with this program. However, it's the highest level of supervision we have to date.
We've had 100% success rate. It makes me a little nervous to say that.
But you're saying 100% success?
100% success rate with GPS monitoring.
The Cindy Bischoff law will protect ordinary victims from extraordinary fear.
Mike Bischoff continued the work his sister started, and in 2008, the Illinois legislature passed a bill that bears her name, allowing the use of GPS monitoring in domestic violence cases.
I love my daughter so much that I did not have her buried. I have her cremated, and I have a beautiful urn next to me in my bed.
For Tiana's father and her mother, Kathy Lewis, it's too late for their daughter.
So whenever I can't take the pain of losing her, I grab the urn and I sleep with it.
But they hope that common piece of technology will save the lives of other women who are guilty only of loving the wrong man. This is Vicki Mabry for Nightline in Boston.